while they have a seat, we will prepare to read, and this game will be it. After this, we'll give out some trophies and name our all-stars. I'm not doing anything. Just watch out. Okay.
One more game.
This right here. This is the final two. This is it. We're doing it. Right here. All right, I have a source sheet. Good.
Are we ready?
All right. Anybody else coming in or going out? We're starting.
Okay, here we go. This is last round, toss-up 1. The activation energy for interdiffusion depends sensitively on the concentration of one form of these. The E to A ratio corresponds very closely to the SFE, which is the energy density associated with a type of these known as a stacking fault. Point-like ones and their antiparticles comprise Frankel pairs and can be
Crystal defects.
That's right.
Oh.
Your bonus. This man issued a 1775 proclamation promising freedom for any slave who escaped to join the Loyalist cause, later organizing them into the Ethiopian Regiment. For 10 points each, named this last royal governor of Virginia.
Yeah, I think it's
more famous for a namesake war. He fought against Native Americans. Lord Dunmore's war was sparked by fury over this 1774 massacre where white settlers killed several members of the Mingo tribe, including the pregnant sister of their chief, whose fetus they allegedly scalped.
Sure.
What do you have? This is the Yellow Creek Massacre. As a young man, this Indian leader was outraged by Lord Dunmore's war. Along with his prophet brother, he would lead the Shawnee against the United States during the War of 1812.
Yeah, if it comes to
That is 20. Toss-up 2. This architect projected a large X's and O's diagram onto his never-built building for the National Football Hall of Fame in New Brunswick. One structure designed by this architect, located near the Esherick house of one of his employers, was described by Frederick Schwartz as the first postmodern anything for its monumental facade, and was designed for his mother, Vanna, in Philadelphia. Aaron Vinegar's I Am a Monument is a critical examination of a book co-written by this man, his wife Denise Scott Brown, and Stephen Eisenhower that celebrated roadside decor in the strip of the title City.
Venturi.
That's right.
Yeah.
Your bonus. These objects encode the symmetries of differential equations. That is, they are groups of operators whose actions map one solution of a differential equation to another. For 10 points each, name these structures, which can also be understood as differentiable manifolds having compatible operations.
Ooh, that, yeah, I like that. Lie groups?
Yes. A Lie group can be generated from its corresponding Lie algebra using this function. It can be understood for abstract objects using its power series expansion 1 plus x squared over 2 factorial plus x cubed over 3 factorial, and so on.
Isn't that just exponential? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like exponential e to the x.
You can make a Lie algebra by appending a Lie bracket to one of these spaces over a field. According to their axioms, these spaces have commutative associative addition with inverse and identity, and also have associative distributive multiplication by scalars with identity.
Wait, is that a fancy way of saying rings? Also.
Could be.
Right.
Go for it.
Rings.
These are vector spaces. You
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Toss-up
Scalars,
3.
yeah.
One ruler with this title sparked the Kaparaya when he debased the currency. Another holder of this office created several powerful ministers with the title Oberprocurator. A female ruler with this title took Ernst von Biron as a lover. From the early 1700s, holders of this title were assisted by a council called the General Senate. Holders of this office exercised control over the church through the Holy Synod. It is not in Germany, but one holder of this title issued the anti-Semitic May laws, which prohibited the creation of new towns by Jews. The Church of the Savior on Spilled Blood,
Like Tsar of Russia.
your bonus. This deity is responsible for such diverse phenomena as the evening and day stars, setting and guarding the sun, fire, disease, deformity, and helping the dead to Mictlan for 10 points each. Name this twin brother of Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah.
Of course, you can avoid Jalal walking you to north to Mictlan by dying in this fashion. People who die this way get to go to the solar paradise of the west, where they still see Jalal every night.
That's what we thought. Is that Tlaloc domain? Then yeah, probably. Drowning.
Childbirth. When you do see Jalal, he usually manifests as fire, lightning, a crazed beast with backward feet, a dog-headed humanoid, or as one of these, his usual depiction in art.
Oh,
Another X.
always in the U.S.
What do you have?
It's a black one.
It's a skeleton. Oh, yeah. 10 points. Toss up 4. The protagonist of this novel reads a fragment about a notary who draws up the last will of a dying gentleman and learns that his servant used the rest of the story to wrap up a bouquet. Near the beginning of this novel, its narrator refuses to give charity to a Franciscan monk, but makes amends by exchanging snuff boxes with him. In later episodes, the narrator tries to free a caged starling, which repeats the words, "I can't get out," and feels the pulse of a beautiful grisette in a glove shop. In its final section, which takes place at an inn at Moulin, the narrative abruptly breaks off after the protagonist reaches out in a dark room and accidentally touches a chambermaid's buttocks. It was first published in 1768, the same year of its author's death, and is narrated by its author's stand-in Yorick.
Tristram Shandy.
No. For 10 points, name this fictional account of a trip to France and Italy, written by Lawrence Stern.
Sentimental journey.
That's your bonus. For 10 points each, answer the following about adolescence in French literature. In this only novel by Hélène Fournier, the adolescent Augustine falls in love with Yvette de Galais and a dream-like fete put on by her brother Franz. What do you have?
The last.
No. It's Le Grand Monet, or The Wanderer, or The Lost Domain, or The End of Youth. Adolescent readers were a major audience for this author, whose series Voyage Extraordinaire included 5 Weeks in a Balloon and 4 Days to the Moon.
Yeah, Vernon.
2 adolescents have plenty of sex involving eggs and bull's testicles in this author's pornographic novel, The Story of the Eye. He also wrote surrealistic works like The Solar Age.
Oh yeah, Bataille.
20 points. Good battalion knowledge. Here's your bonus. Toss-up for everybody. Toss-up. Boreme is a model used to estimate this quantity for VOCs. Duran's rule suggests that for 2 different substances, the temperature for which this quantity is equal have a linear relationship. A Knudsen cell can be used to measure very small values of this quantity using effusion. The type of this quantity named for Riem is a measure of the volatility of fuels. A 3-parameter relation for this is the Antoine equation.
Vapor pressure.
This empire was established by Ramathibodi I, who established Theravada Buddhism as the state religion and issued a code of laws called the Dharma Shastra. For 10 points each, name this empire that ruled much of modern-day Thailand from 1351 to 1767.
Oh, perhaps.
Yes.
Ayutthaya?
Yes. Ayutthaya engaged in a protracted trade rivalry with this Muslim polity that controlled a namesake strait. This polity enjoyed Chinese support and had the upper hand in the conflict until its 1511 conquest by the Portuguese under the Duke of Albuquerque.
Malacca?
Yes. Ayutthaya was vanquished by an invasion from this upstart Burmese dynasty, which ruled modern-day Myanmar before being conquered by the British in 1885. It was Burma's last royal dynasty.
Yeah. Oh, what's that? Put on.
It's Kumbang. You received 20 points. Toss-up 6. In one work, this thinker explored Descartes' project of pure inquiry and its failure to provide an absolute conception of reality. And in another work, imagined that the day cannot be too far, in which we shall hear no more of a certain philosophical doctrine. This thinker began with a subhuman model of motivation in a paper that concluded that only internal reasons rather than external reasons exist. This philosopher denied the possibility of doing moral philosophy from what he called an Archimedean point outside of all knowledge, and called morality the peculiar institution that we would be better off without. In his 1985 work, Ethics and the Limits of Philosophy.
Me?
No, it's you, dude.
Williams.
That's right. Sorry, I thought you were going to go
Thank
first.
you for doing that.
In 1949, this soprano shocked the opera world by singing Elvira in I Puritani just days after performing as Brunhilde in Die Walküre. For 10 points each, named this Greek-American soprano known for her blood canto roles, wide vocal range, and dramatic intensity. She had a long rivalry with Rinaldo Tibaldi, and lost nearly 80 pounds near the early 1950s.
Alice.
Callas is known for performing as Amina, the title character of this Vincenzo Bellini opera. It includes the aria A non Fedea, in which Amina sings about her love for Elvino.
Yes, it was Sleepwalker.
Yes. This Australian coloratura soprano was also known for her bel canto repertoire and was nicknamed La Stupenda after singing the title role of Handel's Alcina at La Fenice. In 1959, she became famous for performing the title role of Zeffirelli's production of Lucio di Lammermoor.
It can't be Sutherland. She's a famous instrument. Sutherland.
That's right. You get 30. That's the answer. You get 30 points. Toss-up 7. Thomas Beecham conducted a bombastic 1959 recording of this work based on the reorchestration of it by Eugene Goossens. The composer of this work adapted portions of it for his cantatas Quel fior cial alvaride and No di voi non both Fidarmi. The first part of this work alludes to rural Italian bagpipers calling pipero. Here's your bonus. Conn's syndrome involves an overproduction of this hormone as a result of an adrenal tumor. Name this mineral corticoid produced in the adrenal cortex that acts on the nephron. What do you got? Aldosterone. Aldosterone is considered part of this system of blood pressure and fluid balance. ACE inhibitors work on an enzyme in this system. What do you got? No, it's the renin-angiotensin or ROS system. Renin is excreted by these cells in the kidney, along with the macula densa cells and Lacus cells. They make, or Lacis cells possibly, they make up a namesake apparatus. No, it's juxtaglomerular or JG or granular cells. So no points on the bones. Tasabate. One ancient culture in this nation produced ceremonial bronze bells decorated with animals that prey on agricultural pests. Prehistoric inhabitants of this nation made female Venus figurines called dobus. From the 3rd to the 7th century AD, tribes in this nation built distinctive keyhole-shaped burial mounds called tofu.
Japan.
The main character of this novel is born with a heavenly piece of jade and is now for temperance. His name is Qi Dynasty novel by Cao Shuiwen. It centers in Bao Yu, the eldest inherit the declining Jia family, and is the most recent of the full reclass of Chinese novels.
Written by Chamber.
Bao Yu is in love with this woman, his first cousin, and believes he's marrying her at his wedding until he learns that his family tricked him into marrying the more worldly Jue Bao Tai. She dies of grief after discovering the deception. No, it's Lin Daiyu. This other prose work from the Qing Dynasty was written by Hu Songling. It consists of 431 supernatural stories, about many seductive fox spirits, and one about a man who buys penis enlargement pills from a monk and then becomes crippled by his astonishingly massive erection.
That's smog.
Sure. Tales from Ghost Studio.
That's not what I have. I have strange stories from a Chinese studio. I need.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Okay.
Alright,
Okay,
okay.
why don't you look that up? There are a lot of different translations. So, 10 points for now. Toss-up 9. In this play's third act, one character delivers a drunken monologue in which he claims to have written the marriage of Figaro, Robert Le Diable, and Norma, and taken charge of a huge department before he slips and nearly falls. Meyerhold's 1926 production of this play replaced all of his characters with mannequins for its final stage direction, which requires its characters to stay frozen in place for 90 seconds. In its final scene, one of its characters shakes his fist at the audience and exclaims, "What are you laughing at? You're laughing at yourselves." The protagonist of this play shamelessly flirts with Anna and her daughter Maria after being discovered by Bob Chinsky and Dog Chinsky. Its climax occurs when a postmaster opens a letter roundly mocking all of its main characters, who have all offered bribes to Klestikov. For 10 points, they...
Inspector General.
Here's your bonus. The Catholic, Orthodox, and Anglican churches all make this a prerequisite for valid ordination. For 10 points each, name this requirement, which states that priests can only be ordained by those who can trace their ordination back in an unbroken chain to the original disciples of Christ.
Apostolic succession.
Yes, one of the first writers to make a big deal of apostolic succession was this North African theologian of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, who also was the first to use the word Trinity. He's not a saint because he died as an adherent of the Montanist heresy. Tertullian. Many Christian churches in Asia, such as the Assyrian Church of the East and the Chaldean Catholic Church, claim that this apostle ordained their first leaders. This apostle is said to have been martyred in India.
Is it Thomas?
That's right, the 10. Toss of 10. This action is followed by the ikama, which is timed either to allow a person to finish a meal or to allow for 2 optional rakas. It is performed near sunset. This action is usually done with fewer melismas, allowing it to be completed sooner, while the Fajr version of this act is performed early in the morning. This practice is...
I'm going to say Salat.
That is incorrect. This practice was adopted under the future Caliph Umar and had a vision that Muslims should distinguish themselves from Jews and Christians. This action is often performed on a special platform, and the first to do it was Bilal, an Abyssinian slave. The person performing this action turns his head to the left side while repeating the phrase, "Come to success." Both the Sunni and Shia versions begin with the takbir by reciting Allahu Akbar 4 times before mentioning Salat for 10 points. It's actually performed 5 times daily by the muezzin from a minute. Yes. Your bonus. The Torrey Channel and the Marlborough Sounds are drowned valleys that connect to this body teaching a strait that separates New Zealand's North and South Islands. The North Island is home to this largest lake in New Zealand, created 27,000 years ago by a supervolcanic eruption. This is the second largest lake in Oceania.
Lake Weta.
Lake Taupo, south of South Island on the other side of the Foveaux Strait, lies this third largest island in New Zealand. Its largest city is Oban.
Far southern island.
Stewart Island, 10 points.
Okay. We were rolling on the thing yet?
I cannot find any translation.
Okay.
I was just pushing. Okay.
All right, so given that, I have a halftime score of Illinois with 195 and Yale with 55. Do we agree? All right.
Toss of 11. A recent paper in Neuron identified an excess buildup of amino acid in the hippocampus as an important precursor to this condition. Another paper showed that this condition is identified by breakdown of networks in glutamate-responsive NMDA receptors. Kurt Schneider created a list of first-rank symptoms commonly used as diagnostic indicators for this condition. Jonathan Metzel showed that African American men have become frequently diagnosed with this condition during the 1960s and 70s after the DSM-2 changed its symptoms to emphasize hostility and aggression. Pseudo-patients faked syndromes of this disorder to become admitted to mental hospitals in an experiment conducted by David Rosenhan. Your bonus. In the Corey-Tchaikovsky reaction, they are prepared from carbonyl groups interacting with sulfonium halides for 10 points each. Name these highly strained cyclic ethers, which can also be prepared by the Prilazhiev reaction. Yes. In the nitrogen analog of epoxides, these compounds can be made by addition of nitrines to alkenes as well as by the Corey-Tchaikovsky reaction.
Nitrates.
Aziridines. This method of asymmetrically preparing epoxides involves potassium peroxide monosulfate, otherwise known as oxone, and a fructose derivative. Say that? No, this is called the Shea oxidation. That's 10. Toss of 12. One king of this dynasty organized the Vilasur expedition to the New World, which was massacred by Native Americans in what is now Nebraska. Another king of this dynasty introduced economic society, an early form of chambers of commerce to promote development. One member of this dynasty was nicknamed the Felon King for his renunciation of a liberal constitution. It's not from England, but one ruler of this dynasty was deposed in a glorious revolution that briefly saw this dynasty replaced by...
Ball.
Sir?
Yeah.
Your bonus. The title Pioneer holds a musket and rides on a horse in a wintry landscape in one of the paintings from his series on George Washington Bush for 10 points each. Identified this African-American artist who depicted a black child throwing a white doll on the ground in his 1942 painting Tombstones.
It's be like could be like Lawrence, yeah.
Lawrence's migration series begins and ends with work set in one of these locations, with people bound for places like Chicago and St. Louis. Monet painted one of these places in Garson.
Yeah, it's a train station.
Lawrence created a work where farmers picked tomatoes to the left of the lighthouse in this state in a series commissioned by the Containers Corporation of America. German immigrants arrived in this state with a Ben Shahn mural, and Winslow Homer showed women with parasols standing on sandy cliffs in this state.
So it's got to be on the coast somewhere.
Yeah.
What do you got? New Jersey. 20 points. Toss up 13. The onset of this state is governed by a quantity measured in the Casa Grande cup test and known as the third Atterberg limit. When this process occurs underwater, a secondary phenomenon can result that is in turn responsible for the Buma sequence. This condition occurs when pore water incompressibility becomes dominant because of very high loads. This process occurring on a large scale underwater will drive a propagating turbidity current. It can be modeled as a form of shear failure or thixotropy. For 10 points in this behavior, in which dirt or sand lose their cohesion, a condition often seen in earthquakes.
Soil liquefaction.
Yeah. Your bonus. One member of this denomination, Andreas Osiander, arranged for the posthumous publication of Copernicus' On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres for 10 points each. Name this Christian denomination whose beliefs are summarized in the Augsburg Confession written by Philip Melanchthon.
Fine. Okay, start with that.
Protestants.
I mean, I guess I'll prompt you.
Lutherans.
Yes. Early during the Reformation, the Lutherans strongly separated themselves from radicals such as this Anabaptists who became involved in the Peasants' War and captured the Battle of Frankenhausen.
Windsor, right? Well, that Windsor.
Yeah. In this 1660 book, originally published in Dutch, is a history of those killed or persecuted for their belief in Anabaptism. This book is still popular with the Mennonites, who often place a copy of it next to their Bibles.
Go ahead. Book of Martyrs.
What I have is the Martyrs'
Book of
Mirror, or
Martyrs
the
different.
Bloody
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah.
Book of Martyrs is a different thing. You different. Task 14. In one story about this figure, he tricks a man into thinking he could diagnose the Black New Ring in order to kill some sheep and throw them in the river. This figure was often challenged to contests by people who wanted to win his prized single red feather, which he wore to signify his physical prowess.
7 McCall.
That's my 5. This figure was alternately nicknamed the Snag and the Snapping Turtle, and is frequently described in stories as half horse, half alligator. Most accounts of his death agree that he was murdered by Talbot for killing his friend Carpenter. This figure used his gun, Bengal, to shoot tin cups of whiskey off of people's heads. He declared I'm a Salt River Roarer, I'm a ring-tailed squealer in his brag, which may have been addressed to Davy Crockett. For 10 points in this figure for American folklore, who sailed the Ohio and Mississippi River as the king of the keel loaders.
Not Eagles Field. You can say that anyway. Eagles
Okay, the correct answer is my feet. Sorry.
Mike's real.
Toss it, shut up, toss it 15. A novel about this country's war for independence is narrated by Khaled, who falls in love with the daughter of the revolutionary Sita Hira. In another novel set in this country, Mustafa, Lakhdar, Rashid, and Murad all fall in love with the ethereal woman Nejma. Contemporary writers from this country include the author of Memory in the Flesh, Ahlam Mosteganemi, as well as Asya Jabbar. A trilogy named for this country consists of the novels The Big House, The Fire, and The Loom, and was written by Mohammed Deeb, who became its dominant literary figure after the death of Kateb Yassin, while working as a psychologist during its country's rebel.
Algeria.
That's right. Your bonus. One of Alexander Pope's epistles complains that this character turns a school divine and merely argues that about theological quibbles for 10 points each. Name this character who first speaks in Book 3 of the poem he appears in, prophesying a time when he shall be all in all. William Empson wrote a book attacking him as a building tyrant.
Yeah.
God is a pretty important character in this epic poem. His second book features a debate in pandemonium.
Paradise Lost.
Indeed, along with T.S. Eliot, this English critic dismissed the grand style of Paradise Lost, arguing that Milton exhibits a feeling for words rather than a capacity for feeling through words. This longtime teacher King championed morally serious literature in books like The Great Tradition, and bitterly attacked C.P. Snow in response to Snow's lecture, The Two Cultures. That's right, 30.
After 15, I have 250 for Illinois and 110 for Yale.
Toss-up 16. An old woman holding a gold chalice places 3 fingers on this figure's shoulder in a Hendrik Goltzius painting where she is sleeping. Girodet's treatment of this figure includes a fat turkey.
The name.
Your bonus. In an article co-authored with David Chalmers, this philosopher popularized the notion of the extended mind, and he argued that cognition depends on a feedback cycle between the organism and its environment in natural-born cyborgs. 10 points each. Identify this philosopher at the University of Edinburgh, who also authored Mindware. What do you got?
Land.
Andy Clark. Clark is a noted proponent of this theory, which holds that many cognitive features are dependent on the physical characteristics of an agent. What do you got? Embodied cognition. Prominent embodiment advocate Hubert Dreyfus has argued that artificial intelligence will continue to fail unless it adopts a more phenomenological approach akin to that of this philosopher who wrote Being in Time. 17. In some areas, the production of this natural resource also leads to the production of the Eta fruit. Nicholas Ridley promoted the production of this natural resource in Asia. The plants that produce this resource were first commercially exported by Henry Wickham, who grew them in Ceylon. In the early 20th century, American industrialists created a colony to produce this product, which became known as Fordlandia, but it was wiped out by a leaf blight that now prevents this product from being commercially grown in its native South America. In Africa, that's right, you. Your bonus. This book distinguishes between three types of legitimate domination. In its first section, Basic Sociological Terms, delineates 4 kinds of social actions for 10 points each. Named this unfinished sociological treatise, which was edited by its author's wife, Mary Ann, and published posthumously in 1922.
Economic society.
That's right.
Okay.
Economy and Society is the magnum opus of this German sociologist, who linked capitalism with economic success in the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism.
Weber.
This sociologist translated many works by Weber into English, including the first 4 chapters of Economy and Society. He analyzed social interaction using 5 pattern variables, including affectivity and effective neutrality. Class 18. A conatase is an unusual example of one of these that interacts directly with its substrate. In the recent approach,
Iron sulfur protein.
Your bonus. In 2007, this man wrote a book claiming that World War IV is America's longest struggle against Islamofascism for 10 points each. Named this neoconservative, the longtime editor-in-chief of Commentary, he wrote about learning to hate black people while growing up in Brooklyn in his 1963 essay, My Negro Problem and Ours.
Wow.
What do you got? What?
Boyard.
No, it's Norman Podhoretz. Podhoretz originally commissioned James Baldwin's Letter to a Region in My Mind, which was later published as Down at the Cross in his 1963 book. It analyzed the popularity of the Nation of Islam and takes its title from the spiritual about the Last Judgment.
The fire next time.
In 1955, Baldwin burst onto the scene of his collection, which ends with an essay about his visits to Switzerland, Stranger in the Village, and criticizes Richard Wright in its essays Everybody's Protest Novel and Many Thousands Go On. Its title essay eulogizes Baldwin's dead father.
Yes, what's that? In,
What do you got?
what's called?
Huh?
I can't remember what's called.
Okay, it's called Notes of Mavis.
That's what it's called.
19. One politician from this state owned the ready-mix concrete company and used his post to award himself municipal construction contracts. At the turn of the 20th century, one city in this state was home to a rival political faction named the Goats and the Rabbits. In the 1920s, a congressman from the state introduced a bill that would make lynching a federal crime, only to see filibustering in the Senate. That man was Leonidas Dyer. A 1948 Supreme Court case originating from this state involved racially restrictive covenants. That case, which prohibited private bans and selling houses to blacks, was Shelley Kramer. A senator from the state was the 3rd place finisher in the 1960 presidential election.
So where was that dude from? Mississippi?
That's wrong. For the 1960 presidential nomination, Stuart Symington. One of the state's major cities was once controlled by the Pendergrass machine, while its largest city was formerly home to the notorious Pruitt Eagle Housing Project for 10 points in its home state of Fairview. This composer wrote and frequently performed adagio for his ballet Spartacus, which we're teaching. The Armenian composer's ballet Yang Yan continues his savory dance. Khachaturian's Masquerade Suite begins with one of these pieces. Shostakovich's second jazz suite includes a frequently performed one.
Waltz.
It is. In 1948, the Secretary of the Soviet Union Central Committee condemned the formalism of Khachaturian's music in his namesake decree, which also attacked Prokofiev and Shostakovich.
Well, I mean, is this Zhdanov of the Zhdanov doctrine, perhaps? Sure. Zhdanov?
It's that guy. Last time. This character pretends to be a psychologist and brutally twists the arm of an old man sitting on a toilet before being hit from behind by a chair. He dreams about getting drunk with his college buddies Steve Garvey and Judd Hume and brutally sacrificing a young lamb. This character lives in a bare room only decorated by an ivory Christ, which inspires him to have a religious experience and makes him believe he can miraculously heal a malevolent cripple in this Hopper's final chapter. He attempts to cure his despair by going to a farm in Connecticut with Betty, but is still tormented by the suffering of fevers like a girl born without a nose. This character's burgeoning faith is constantly mocked by Willie Shrike, his editor.
Miss Lonely Hearts.
This man, never mind. One of these associated to a given linear problem can be found by replacing the source term with a Dirac delta function. When they account for time, they are known as propagators, for 10 points each. Name these functions in mathematical physics whose convolution with a source gives an unknown function.
Yeah, Green's functions.
Indeed, a Green's function is called a Green's kernel when it does not account for these. For a second-order equation, linear forms can be classified as Dirichlet, Newman, or Robinson.
Yes.
Boundary conditions.
A Green's function will be symmetric in its arguments if and only if its corresponding problem has this property.
Like, what's the time invariant causal? That's time invariant. That would be
Yeah,
something like,
invariant under time reversal.
No, it's self-adjoint.
Okay.
That's 20 points, and that's the game.
All right, Final score: Yale with 105, Illinois with 400. I got some trophies and things for you.
Benji, you did excellent.
I was so good at resetting.
Right?